Captivating villains have been a staple of cinema for what feels like an eternity, and some of these devious characters have even gone on to become more popular than the heroes of the stories they were a part of. Charming. However, some utterly brilliant bad guys and gals weren't ultimately lucky enough to be a part of a truly magnificent piece of filmmaking, and found themselves wedged into a movie that quite simply failed to take up permanent residence in the memories of those who actually chose to sit through them. These villains right here all absolutely deserve to be plucked from the realms of mediocrity and applauded for their terrific presence in spite of the stale film they called home. So with that all said, I am Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 8 awesome villains in forgotten movies. Number 8, Akasha, Queen of the Damned. Remember the 2002 sequel to Neil Jordan's Interview with the Vampire? You know, Queen of the Damned. Of course you don't. That was probably down to the fact that none of the original cast from the first movie chose to return for the sequel. Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt and Kirsten Dunst among them. And this subsequently resulted in a significant drop in both acting and overall film quality. Queen of the Damned left out a fair few important characters and plotlines from the book series upon which it was based, which led to many critics and even the writer of the series, Anne Rice, denouncing the half-baked finished product. Rice would even go on to say the filmmakers mutilated her work. That is one way of putting it. Despite the sequel's obvious pitfalls though, one character did manage to find a way to stick out, in a good way. Singer-actress Aaliyah's deliciously serpentine portrayal of the ancient vampire queen Akasha was both a triumph and an overwhelming shame. Aaliyah would tragically die in a horrendous plane crash whilst the movie was in post-production, and this compelling performance as the venomous villainess stands as a reminder of just how brilliant a performer she could have gone on to be, had she not been taken at such a young age. Now while we're talking about movie villains in this list, I want to know right now, who is your favourite movie villain of all time? You let me know in the comment section down below. Number 7, Trevor Viking Cal, Cold Pursuit. Despite the fact that 2019's revenge thriller Cold Pursuit was blighted in the lead up to its release by Liam Neeson coming across as a racist, the film was actually half decent in the end. Burrowed into the snowy setting was one standout performance in particular though. Tom Bateman's Trevor Viking Cal served as a true slimeball, and slithered his way through countless scenes, chewing every piece of dialogue he was given, and making the audience yearn for his eventual demise. They got their wish when his car was impaled by a tree, and he was then blasted through the chest by Tom Jackson's White Bull LeGroux. But Bateman's almost Brando-esque delivery oozed the kind of smarmy charm which made fans both long for and despise his very presence on screen. As memorable as this movie definitely wasn't, it still finds itself equipped with one of the more enjoyable villains to have popped up in a late 2010s dark comedy thriller, and remains one of the few saving graces in a project barely anyone remembers or even talks about anymore. Number 6, Carnagey, Book of Eli. 2010 was a pretty stacked year in terms of action movies, wasn't it? With the likes of The Expendables, Legion, Robin Hood, Iron Man 2 and Kick-Ass all pumping sizable shots of adrenaline into the popcorn-munching fans in attendance. But this year also marked the arrival of one of Denzel Washington's least celebrated appearances as the titular character in the Hughes brothers directed action film The Book of Eli. Lambasted as a ponderous dystopian bummer, The Book of Eli's narrative surrounding a nomad trying to deliver a mysterious book to a safe spot evidently was not for everyone. With that said, one man still managed to carve a bit of brilliance out of the meandering flick. Gary Oldman's distinctly hammy depiction of villain Carnagey delivered everything you'd expect from the outstanding legend of cinema in this sort of role. The warlord spends much of the film desperately trying to prise the fabled Bible from Eli's grasp, and when he does, the tables are hilariously turned on him as the book is revealed to be written in Braille, with Eli turning out to be blind all along. Got him. In a film which is often just too dreary to fully invest in, Oldman injects a colourful palette of madness, and succeeds in becoming the only memorable aspect of an otherwise limp action/neo-western snoozefest. Number 5, Walter Wade Jr., Shaft. With a pretty mixed bag of reviews, 2000's Shaft remake/sequel of the 1971 feature of the same name didn't do much to announce itself as the franchise reinvigorator the studio hoped it would be. Boasting a pretty impressive cast including Toni Collette, Jeffrey Wright, Richard Roundtree, who was the original Shaft, and Samuel L. Jackson as John Shaft II, the film definitely had enough potential performance power to suggest that it would be a decent all-round action thriller. It did have a ton of style and a few laughs in there, but the only really memorable performance came from an actor who'd recently made the world stand up and take notice due to his visceral performance in American Psycho. A young Christian Bale manages to produce a performance so volatile and despicable in the openly racist Walter Wade Jr. that it only serves as a timely reminder of just how diverse the actor can truly be on his day. Luckily, Bale would not be weighed down by the rest of the forgettable mediocrity on show, and would go on to add numerous other stellar turns to his now legendary CV. It's just a shame though that his sickeningly villainous performance here got lost in such an unmemorable entry. Thanks for checking out this video today, folks, and if you're enjoying what you're watching, then hit that subscribe button down below for more What Culture stuff in your life. Number 4, the Xenomorph, Alien vs Predator. Here we find a character which was catapulted into the realms of cinematic immortality in another film, only to find itself trapped inside of an uninspired afterthought of a movie later down the line. Poor thing. The character in question is that of the now iconic Xenomorph. First seen in Ridley Scott's 1979 sci-fi horror game-changer Alien 40 plus years ago. Man, we're getting old. Slinking its way into the nightmares of children and adults alike, the Xenomorph's birth via the chest of those unfortunate enough to have their faces hugged was definitely enough to induce vomiting alone. So when the fully formed creature reared its disturbing head for the first time, it was enough to leave audiences yearning for even more jump scares courtesy of the titular fiend. After a few more Alien films burst onto the scene in the aftermath of the original, the decision was then made to combine the lore of the creature with that of the Predator universe, and Alien vs Predator hatched out of the big screen in 2004. The film succeeded in creating a few more epic moments of Xenomorph-inspired terror, and brought another mammoth Xenomorph queen back into the mix. Can never go wrong there. Yet the feature ultimately had a bit of a weak plot, and way too much time was spent with the dull humanoids acting as lamb for the glorious slaughter. Forgettable and ultimately a bit pointless as it may have been, at least we got to see our favourite acid-bleeding alien monstrosities again. Number 3, Queen Ravenna, Snow White and the Huntsman. 2012 was a weird year. Away from the world threatening to end, we were presented with not one, but 2 films involving an apple-loving princess called Snow White. Mirror Mirror didn't exactly set the world on fire, and Snow White and the Huntsman barely did much better. Yet at least the latter was successful enough to garner a sequel, even if it was ultimately as forgettable as the first entry was. Yet both of these fantastical tales included one particularly intimidating performance from one of the world's most versatile actors in Charlize Theron. Being applauded for her first turn as Queen Ravenna, this performance boasted the blood of operatic anger, as Entertainment Weekly put it, and Theron engulfed every scene that she appeared in. Her clear anger at a male-dominated world was played out masterfully by the South African-American actor. The rest of the first film didn't receive this same level of praise, and was chastised for being tangled and overblown. Then the wretched sequel killed off any hope of another entry into the series in 2016. You're not missing much if this film hasn't popped up on your radar already. Yet if you are a fan of acting on a truly epic and operatic scale, then Theron's performance in this mostly forgettable series is definitely worth a look. Number 2, Leland Gaunt, Needful Things. 1993's Needful Things sits as one of the more forgettable Stephen King film adaptations, and a largely repetitive story undoes a lot of the excellent work put in by the film's talented cast. But the undoubted star of the show was the legendary Max von Sydow, seemingly as the devil himself, Leland Gaunt. Disguised as an antique dealer, this version of what seems to be the devil opened up a shop in, you guessed it, Maine, and went on to sell the unsuspecting neighborhood whatever their hearts desired, all for the price of a joyously large dose of pain and suffering. Von Sydow oozed charm and was as enticing as he was disarming, right up until the moment he eventually fled the burnt down and traumatized town with a spring in his step. However, aside from this delightfully sinister turn from Von Sydow, the film doesn't offer much else in terms of memorability and has been understandably forgotten by many fans. And number 1, Mage Pron, Dungeons & Dragons 2000. Look, there's no way getting around this one. 2000's Dungeons & Dragons was a bad movie. Many of the original game's mythical role-playing diehards have made an active decision to forget the film ever existed. And with a 9% Rotten Tomatoes score, it's not hard to see why. Looking every bit as cheap and badly directed as its tomato score suggested, the The film was a serious contender for worst film of the century barely a year into it. Surely a film this bad could not contain any redeeming features, right? Well, despite the majority of the cast being made up of equally forgettable faces, Academy Award winner Jeremy Irons was still on hand to deliver something resembling a good performance. Playing the evil wizard Mage Pron, Irons spends most of the runtime plotting to take over the world by using a magical scepter to control dragons. However, despite that aforementioned sentence sounding a bit ridiculous, Irons forced you to believe in this snarling villain's dreadful potential for chaos. Now, Dungeons & Dragons may deserve to be permanently scorched from your memory via a wave of dragon fire, yet Irons' performance should still be remembered as an untarnished piece of devilishly flamboyant acting beauty. In Irons we trust.